So you just gave Krista the credit card and she's going to buy a new tablet? Is she going to get like a Surface or something like that?
I don't know. She played with my Surface. She didn't really like the pen on it, but you know, it wasn't too bad. She also tried the Wacom Intuos, but maybe something a little higher end would be what she's got in mind. Could be like a Wacom Cintiq. I mean, that could be pretty good.
That's no Wacom. That's an iPad.
No!
It just works, bitches. So you guys just watched the intro, you've read the title, you know what this video is going to be about. I can already hear the clicker clack of your keyboards as you angrily type angry comments about A, Wendell's not here reviewing this hardware, and B, you're doing Apple normie hardware. Well, you're right. We are doing Apple normie hardware. This is the review of the iPad Pro. And spoiler alert, I really like it, and I don't really care that you guys don't. You know, sure, it's great for watching stuff on YouTube. It's got a beautiful screen. It's huge. It's great for holding up at concerts and like blocking everyone else's view behind you, taking photos, editing video, all that stuff. No headphone jack, fantastic. So yeah, I'm using it for my day job, and honestly, like compared to every past method, which I have laid out here on this table, I think that this has been the best progression I've made yet. So prior to me getting the iPad Pro and becoming an Apple normie, I actually was an even bigger normie. I worked almost entirely in traditional media. A bunch of the items on our store were done with traditional media. That meant drawing on paper with a hard lead pencil, so it would be very light. I would start with lots of sketches and kind of rough shapes, then drawing with a darker lead pencil, over that using a light table. Then on top of that, I would either use traditional ink and brush or a series of pens to do all the artwork and to make the lines nice and bold. Then I would scan it, take it into Photoshop, and do lots of cleanup work to make sure that the image looked good and crisp. This was extremely time consuming, like insanely time consuming. Any straight line I had to make had to be done with a T-square or a ruler. If I wanted a nice smooth curve, you had to do it with an item called a French curve. I was constantly going through erasers. It was a real issue. And it kind of slows down production when you're constantly dealing with these traditional media. If you made one mistake in, you know, ink world, the whole drawing is just ruined. You just kind of have to throw it out and start over, which happened a lot. But since moving on to digital media, I've found that there's a lot of really great competitors and has made my job a lot easier. When I decided to go more into the digital realm after working in traditional for years, the first thing I used was a Wacom Tablet. This is the Intuos 3, and the reason I picked it was because it was available. This was released, I think, in 2008. We had one lying around the office, and that's what I used. It's definitely a little bit weird, partly because it's older, so you know you have some issues with it, but also I wasn't used to not looking at my hand while I was drawing, so if you're drawing with this, you're having to stare at the screen and then like look away from your hand, and there's definitely a little bit of a disconnect there. It takes a while to get used to. But I was fine with it, and I was learning to get better with it. My issue with this, and the reason I ended up moving away from it, was because I may have busted the cord taking it back and forth from work. Wendell thinks my dog chewed on it. There's no proof of that, though she may have done it. I think I probably slammed it in a car door. Either way, portability was kind of an issue with this, and you can't get replacement cords for Wacoms this old. So when I started looking at the newer Wacoms, you know, obviously they've come a long way, and I could get one that even had a screen built in that was portable and solved a lot of the issues I had previously. But before I did that, I kind of wanted to make sure that it was worth the money, because they are very expensive. So in that corner, the first ones I was looking at was the Wacom Cintiq, and there's also the Mobile Studio Pro. I was actually more interested in the Mobile Studio Pro just because I wouldn't have the issue of the cord breaking and messing up so much. However, the cost is such a deterrent, and you, like I said, you can't try it out anywhere. So you're looking at spending up to $2,000, I think up to $3,000 on this thing if you get the larger size, and there's no real guarantee. The other issue I had with the Wacom brand is that I had constant issues with driver updates with the old one, and that's partially because it was old, but I hated having to play Troubleshooting Simulator with it for so long. You know, I had a lot of issues getting it to run in Krita, getting my pressure sensitivity right in Photoshop. Sometimes it would only work on Linux. Sometimes it would only work in Windows, and there was no real rhyme or reason to it. It was just weird driver problems with the tablet constantly. And when you're having to deal with that instead of doing your work, you're not making money for your client, and that's not great. So that kind of put them sort of on the back burner for me. There are cheaper Wacom available, and I looked into those as well. One of the brands is Huion. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. It's sort of a Chinese knockoff, though their quality has gotten quite a bit better according to everything I've read. I do have a Huion lightboard. The lightboard I have, though, not in love with the build quality. I've used it only lightly over the last few years, and it's kind of falling apart now. So I was a little reluctant to spend, again, a significant chunk of money on a Wacom tablet and then find out, oh, it's gonna fall apart in the same way the light table did. And the next thing I tried was the Microsoft Surface, which I know a lot of people in our audience really like. Wendell has one. We use it to monitor the Twitch stream pretty often. And that was about my depth of experience with it prior to doing these sort of experiments. The first place I actually checked, I went to Best Buy, and the Amazon showroom, as it's sometimes called, and just played around with some of the different pens and the different tablets. And I personally was not really for me. The issue I found with the Surface was that the pen felt sort of unresponsive, and it felt like you were drawing on a really thick plate of glass. That's called parallax, I guess. I learned that. And it's not a very satisfying experience, and it makes you not able to forget the fact that you're drawing on a tablet. It doesn't feel natural, especially coming from traditional media. I also wasn't super interested in the other features on the Surface. I mean, it'd be nice to have a full laptop, but it wasn't the reason I was getting this. So that left the iPad Pro. I was actually, I guess, kind of lucky because they were releasing the newer model around the time I was looking. But the first item I tested at Best Buy was the older model with the old pencil style where it sticks out of the end when you charge it, and it's a little awkward. That being said, it was night and day the difference between the other competitors that I tried. So the reason I ended up with the iPad Pro is, despite my best judgment, despite the judgment of everyone around me, literally the judgment of everybody around me, was largely for this. This is the iPad Pencil, and this is the second gen, but the first gen was equally good. The reason I really like this is just because of how well it draws. It manages to get tilt correctly if you're drawing with like a pencil, for example, or the equivalent of a pencil in a drawing app. You kind of get the feeling of it actually being on paper. It's fantastic in that way. The weight of it is also really nice. It's very comparable to one of my traditional pencils. And the shape and the length, everything about it is just right. Some people have complained, at least online, that it's not as ergonomic as, say, like the Wacom stylus, but personally, I don't find that to be an issue for me. And I know some people who've literally just put a regular pencil grippy on it and had no problem with it. And then I had mentioned this previously with some of the other tablets, particularly with the Surface, where it felt like you were drawing on really thick glass. There's no feeling like that on the iPad at all. It feels like I'm drawing straight on paper. It's definitely a little bit more slick than paper because there's no tooth to it, but it's very nice and just natural to pick up. I didn't feel like I had like any sort of barrier between me and just starting to draw again. Another great thing about the iPad is there's a huge flux of just creative apps. Now this is kind of a double-edged sword because, obviously if you're using something like Surface, you could use whatever program you want. I'm a big fan of Krita. I did a review of it on the channel before. Unfortunately, I can't use Krita on the iPad, but it has an equally great app that I use called Procreate. And for $10, I have no complaints. They were talking about bringing Photoshop to the iPad. I don't think I even want it. Procreate does everything I need. I also enjoyed the larger screen size. It's comparable, the one I have the 12.9 inch. It's comparable to a regular sheet of paper that I was using previously, so there hasn't been any sort of adjustment period. Of course, you can also pinch and zoom on your drawing, which makes it way easier to get in and do your detail work. But it's also, for the size it is, it's actually fairly portable as well. Before I mentioned, constantly having to take the Wacom back and forth from home to work and having the issue of the cord possibly getting caught in the car door or eaten by my dog or any number of issues. But I've not had that problem with this. I've been carrying this everywhere. So much so that I've literally been carrying it in a giant purse. One that looks like this, that's now being called the iPurse at my office. That being said, like I said, very portable though. not getting caught in anything. I can take it out at lunch, I can take it out at a client meeting and sketch something right in front of a client instead of being like, well, I'll get you a drawing later. And that's been really useful for me. And because it's more portable, because I can take it places, because I can just pull it out whenever and it holds a charge, you know, I've got the pencil with me, I'm finding I'm drawing a lot more than I was before. Before it was, you know, packing this and packing that, and do I have a T-square? I don't know. Do I have the tablet? I don't know. Now it's all just one convenient package. And, you know, we made the joke at the beginning with the skit, you know, it just works, but it really does just work. There's no tablet drivers. There's no ink drawing wrong. There's no smudging the ink with my arm. There's no Photoshop can't get rid of this blue line. It's just fixed. It's there. It just works. And that is a huge perk. There are a few cons to the iPad, if you can believe it. The main one being the cost. It is really expensive, but really, really worth it if you're a professional in the field. And it's definitely cheaper than the comparable Wacom of that size, the Cintiq or the Mobile Studio. And I mentioned this previously as well, where you can't use open source programs. You have to use stuff in the App Store. Kind of sucks, but Procreate more than makes up for that. And there are lots of other ones as well. I've been trying to find a good vector program to use as well. If you guys have any recommendations for that, please tell me, because I would love to be able to draw logos on the iPad instead of having to move to Illustrator on my main machine. And then kind of the last con on my list for the iPad Pro is really the judgment from the community. And, you know, we make a lot of jokes about, you know, oh, this brand sucks and Apple sucks. And honestly, there are a lot of valid reasons to dislike Apple or any company. But after going through and trying out different things and seeing for myself what I liked and what I didn't, I'm really happy with my purchase, and that's really all you can ask for. I've been using it for 3 months now, and I love it. I would really recommend it if you're an illustrator. Now, of course, you know, I mentioned earlier with the caveat that I didn't get a chance to try a newer Wacom. Wacom, if you see this review and you're like, man, we think we can do better, please feel free to send me a Mobile Studio Pro. That being said, we don't expect it, and for now, I'm really happy with the Apple iPad Pro. See you in the forums. Bye!